The SEC always has really good teams, but can their top teams reach the top of college football? Welcome back to Scoring from the 50. My name is Drew, your host, and today we got a full episode of college football. We are predicting every single SEC team season, predicting their record and how I see their season going. So make sure you watch till the end of the episode to see who I have winning the SEC championship this year. Now, let's get right into it. Arkansas, I have them finishing 16th, dead last in the conference. I see them going 3-9 in their season and 0-9 in conference play, not winning a single SEC game. Now, Arkansas, I just don't see a lot there. I don't want to spend too much time on these lower level teams because the last few episodes have gotten pretty long. So Arkansas, don't see a lot there. I mean, they don't have any good players really. And Ryan Silverfield, I didn't like the hire last year. I don't think he's all that good of a coach. I think he definitely was not ready for a big time SEC head coaching job. So don't know how their season's going to go. Don't think it's going to go very well. Now, number 15 is going to be Mississippi State, staying at the bottom of the conference. There's not much there. Still not a good team. Their head coach might get fired this year. Not sure how that's going to go. See them going 3-9 in their season, but instead of Arkansas, they are going to win one game in the SEC, going 1-8 in SEC play. Now, number 14, Vanderbilt, back at the bottom of the conference. I think they're going to rebuild a lot faster than in the past. Look, they got Jared Curtis there, 5-star quarterback. He's going to be really good. Just don't know if he's quite ready yet. Might be thrown into the fire a little bit too early, but we'll see how he does in the future. I think they're going to get a lot better going forward. They will go 5-7 this year. Definitely a jump from the 3-9 teams right below them. We've always talked about how the SEC is really good in the middle of their conference, just not the best at the top, not quite as good as the Big Ten at the top of the conference. So whenever you see 14th and they're still 5-7 and I have the 12th spot still making a bowl game, that should tell you how good the SEC is in the middle of the conference. Only two bad teams, honestly, I don't like them at all in Mississippi State and Arkansas. Vanderbilt, I see them being a lot better than those two teams. 2-7 in conference play, 5-7 overall, 14th for the Vanderbilt Commodores. Now, number 13 is going to be Kentucky. Look, I really like Will Stein. He's a really good offensive coordinator there at Oregon. I think he's going to be really good in the future. Again, he just needs a year to build. And I like Kenny Minchie. I think he's going to be really good. I think Kentucky might be one of these teams that can pop up every once in a while. There's a few teams in this little section where I'm like, man, they could be really good if a few things fall their way. And I think that's almost every single team in the SEC, really. I mean, you look at every single team and you see at least something that you like. You know, you got a 5-star quarterback at Vanderbilt. You got a really good quarterback in Kentucky and a hotshot offensive coordinator as your head coach. You got the next one, South Carolina. They got 3 insanely good players that could go in the first round of the NFL draft. I mean, tons of talent around this conference. Every single team has something good. For Kentucky, it's their quarterback, it's their head coach. I think they're going to be really good in the future. Just need a year to build that foundation, get the culture the way they want it to in their first year, and then build from there going forward. Now, number 12 is going to be South Carolina. Like I just said, they have 3 really good players. Nicholas Harbor, Dylan Stewart, Lenora Sellers, all 3 of them could go in the first round if they have good seasons. They have a ton of potential in those 3 players. The rest of the roster isn't all that great, and that's where I have an issue with. That's why I see them only going 6-6, going 3-6 in conference play. And, you know, it's just hard for me to see Shane Beamer keeping his job with that because, I mean, you have those 3 superstar talents. It's just you haven't built the rest of the roster the way it should be. If you can't surround those 3 players with a good foundation and a good team around them, then how are you ever going to build a team that's good around them? So I kind of feel like Shane Beamer might lose his job this year. We'll see if 6-6 is good enough for that. Maybe they pop up. Again, it's hard to truly say they're going to be terrible with 3 really good players like that. And 6-6 isn't terrible. You're still making a bowl game there, but definitely would like something better whenever 2 years ago you went 9-3, almost made the college football playoffs, and you had one of the best young quarterbacks in the country. So definitely not where they want to be, and they definitely had higher hopes going into this season at least 2 years ago, but really, really, really curious to see how that season goes for them, see if Shane Beamer can keep his job, because he's definitely fighting for it this year, and if it goes wary, then don't see him staying in Columbia, South Carolina for much longer. But moving on to number 11 is going to be Auburn. The brand new coach, got Alex Golesh there. He's going to be really good. They're a lot better than they were. I mean, you lose Cam Coleman, it's hard to have a good offense, right? But Byron Brown's coming in there. He's going to be really good. Probably one of the best quarterbacks that they've had in a good bit. You know, Bo Nix was pretty good, but I think Byron Brown's even a little bit better than that. At least how good Bo Nix was at Auburn. Bo Nix was really good at Oregon, but Bo Nix at Auburn was kind of around how good I think Byron Brown will be, which isn't bad. A few good moments here and there, but not a superstar or anything like that. Not going to win the Heisman. Of course, he is really good, and I think he'll be a top 10 quarterback in the country. Not sure if Bo Nix was even that, so we will see how he does. I think it depends on Byron Brown quite a bit, so really curious to see how good he does, but I love Alex Golesh. I love the mentality that he brings in there. I think he's going to do a really good job. Eventually, just like the one below us and Will Stein, he needs to have a year to build. And same is true for the next team. Number 10 is going to be Florida. You're bringing in some really good coaching staff there. You got John Summerall. You're bringing in a quarterback there. You're bringing in a lot of receiver talent. I think Eric Singleton and Dallas Wilson are going to play a really big factor in the wide receiver room. Both of them should have pretty good years this year. The defense is kind of where I get a little shaky at. They kind of lost a little bit there on the defense side of the ball, but John Summerall is always going to have a really good defense. I love what Florida is going to do in the future, but just like Auburn, just like Kentucky, I think they need a year to build a foundation, get the culture out of there. Because if you look at all three of those teams, the culture there and the vibe there was always really down. You look at Auburn last year with Hugh Freeze. I mean, he's practically blaming the quarterback for all his problems and saying that it was all Jackson Arnold's fault. Well, you're the one who brought Jackson Arnold in, so whose fault is that? So I digress. Hugh Freeze totally had the bad culture there. I think Billy Napier kind of had a lazy-ish culture there. He didn't have, I don't think he brought in the right players. I don't think it was necessarily his fault that the players didn't have the right mentality, but it is his fault for the players that he brought in. So I think he needs to fix that. John Summerall needs to come in and fix those issues that Billy Napier left. Same with Alex Golesh in Auburn. Same with Will Stein in Kentucky. All three of those teams need to build a year and get the culture the right way, get the players in there that they want, and then eventually in 2 or 3 years, they're going to be really, really good. That's the way that I see Florida, Auburn, and Kentucky going. Now, moving in to number 9 is going to be Missouri. Okay, I'm from Missouri. As you see, Kansas City right above me. Okay, I'm from Missouri, so I'm a little biased here, but I kind of like what Missouri's doing. I don't see a ton on the defensive side of the ball, though. If I'm wrong, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. If you guys have really good defensive players, let me know, but I don't see a lot there. You lost Damon Wilson. Then you bring in a guy like Austin Simmons. He could be really good for the Mizzou Tigers. Last year, he was at Ole Miss, lost his job to Trinidad Chambliss. But if last year, going into the season, if he was better than Trinidad Chambliss last year, then he could be really good for Mizzou this year, and that could play a huge factor in the SEC. That is one of the biggest questions in the SEC is if Austin Simmons could come in and do a good job at Mizzou, if he can take them to the next level. If so, then 7-5, my prediction for them, going 4-5 in conference play. This is way off, and they'll be way better than that, and they'll be close to making the college football playoffs. But I don't love what Austin Simmons is doing, and the problem that I have, and trust me, I'm not trying to say anything bad here, but if Ahmed Hardy isn't 100% this season, then who steps up in the running back room to become that reliable running back every single down? Maybe Ahmed Hardy is at least healthy enough to be there most of the time, but someone's going to need to step up and become that second running back in relief of Ahmed Hardy. Look, if you guys don't know, Ahmed Hardy in the offseason, he ended up getting shot at some party, and obviously my thoughts and prayers are out with him, and I hope that he takes football and puts that in the back seat just to get through that, right? If I were him, I'd just be thanking God that I'm alive and breathing, and football is completely secondary to that. So I totally understand if he's not 100%, right? Who would be in that situation? He got shot in the leg. If you're a running back, you kind of need your legs, right? So I totally understand if he's not 100%, but if he's not, if Mizzou wants to continue to win football games, which clearly is not as important as what Ahmed Hardy went through, but if they want to win a lot of football games this year, then they need a running back to step up and take some carries away from Ahmed Hardy and still do a really good job. So praying for Ahmed Hardy, hoping he's getting healthy and doing everything he needs to do. But hopefully the defense can replace a guy like Damon Wilson. That's going to be really hard to do. But I like what Mizzou's building there. I think they're going to have a pretty good season. Just hopefully, I think 7-5 is kind of their floor. That's what I project them to be this year. But I think 7-5 is their floor. They could be even better than that. Now, let's move into number 8. This is where I kind of have a few more notes for each team. Number 8 is going to be Alabama. And I see them going 9-3, 6-3 in conference play, just missing out on the college football playoffs. Who's the quarterback for Alabama? Is it Keelan Russell or is it Austin Mack? Austin Mack came back another year. He's going to be doing a really good job in camp. It seems like it's kind of been off and on who is winning that job. Apparently, we look at the spring game. Keelan Russell by miles outplayed Austin Mack, but it sounds like Austin Mack was hurt in that game. So kind of, we got to put an asterisk there. So Keelan Russell, he's one of those players that down the road, he's probably going to be better than Austin Mack, right? But right now, who gives Alabama the best chance to win football games? That's the question, right? I think probably by the end of the year, I think Keelan Russell wins the job either way. If he's not starting right away, Keelan Russell is one of those players that you can move around, you can get him on the run, you can get him throwing in tough situations, you can get him just running the ball on his own. He is a athlete. He is a big time quarterback that has a ton of potential, former 5-star, number 2 recruit in the 2025 recruiting class. He's the guy with a lot of potential. Or do you go with the guy in Austin Mack? Super reliable. He's going to make the right throws. He's going to make the right decisions. He's always going to play the right game. He's going to play within the system and do a really good job. But he's never going to wow you. He's never going to be an absolutely crazy play type of guy, right? He can move a little bit. He's better at moving around than you think. Kalen DeBoer made a point of that to mention that and talk about that at SEC Media Days. That, hey, we're not paying enough attention to Austin Mack and how well he can move. So I think the quarterback competition is pretty even right now. Personally, I think Keelan Russell wins the job even before the season. I think he should win the job. I think he gives Alabama the most potential. But does Keelan Russell win the job eventually? I think that's 100% yes. By the end of the season, I think Keelan Russell will be the starting quarterback at Alabama. That's obviously the biggest question for Alabama. But the second biggest question is if they can do anything on the ground and in the trenches, because last year they were 100th in the country in yards per game allowed on the ground and then 125th in the country in rushing yards per game. That is absolutely terrible. If Nick Saban was there, he would be ripping people's butts, okay? That is totally unacceptable for Alabama. They have to be able to win the game in the trenches on the ground and win the rushing battle every single game. That should be Alabama's goal. That is their identity and has been for years, is winning the game on the ground, being the more physical team. The fact that they're not, the fact that they let Indiana run the ball 50 times on them is absolutely terrible, and that needs to be fixed somehow. So if Alabama can fix that, if they can figure out their quarterback situation, then maybe they can get to that 10-2 spot and make the college football playoffs. Personally, I don't see it happen. 9-3 is my prediction for Alabama. Now moving on to LSU. So much new in this program. I see them finishing 7th in the SEC, going 9-3 and 6-3 in conference play, same as Alabama. So much new in this program. Who is going to step up and be the superstar? We have a lot of names that potentially could. You got Eugene Wilson coming in there, wide receiver room. You got Sam Leavitt coming in there at the quarterback room. You got Principal Uman Mielen coming in there, the edge rushers. You've got a ton of big time talent coming in there. Who steps up and really takes charge on this team to be the guy, to be the superstar, to be the Joe Burrow coming out with the EAUX on the back of his jersey? Who's doing that? Who's doing that kind of stuff at LSU? Because someone's got to. LSU's full of swagger. You're in Louisiana. You've got a ton of swagger. You should come out and be a different type of player playing in the purple and gold. Who can do that for LSU? If someone does, if someone can step up and really be a superstar on that team, then I believe that this team could be a college football playoff team. But I don't see it happening. I just see them being one game short. I think they're just a little bit short than making the college football playoffs, and I think they probably will in 2027, 2028, moving on past this year, and they're going to be really good down the line. Lane Kiffin obviously is going to be a really good coach, but does he fit there? I personally think he does. I think at LSU, you have to be a good fit. Ed Ogeron was a perfect fit there. Brian Kelly was a terrible fit there. So if Lane Kiffin can get there and really embrace the culture there and kind of be a beloved figure in the LSU minds, because obviously he's not going to be beloved in anyone else's minds. I think that's pretty well and gone by now. I think he's one of the biggest villains in people's minds in college football at this point, after leaving Tennessee the way that he did and everything about the tarmac at USC and then the way that he left Ole Miss last year. Just totally a messy guy. Does not handle a breakup very well at all. So I like Lane Kiffin. I think he's a good coach. I don't like him as a person, maybe. I think he's one of the biggest villains in college football, but everyone can agree that everyone will have his eyes on him and everyone will be watching whenever he's playing in big games, and everyone will have their eyes on that Week 4 game against Ole Miss. And then even going to Ole Miss is going to be in a hostile environment for him. That's going to be incredibly entertaining. I just think next year's the year for LSU. I think next year they're going to be really good. They're going to get more people in the transfer portal. The portal king and Lane Kiffin, he's always going to do a really good job in getting talent into his program. Really excited for what LSU is doing. Just think they're one game short this year. Now, number 6 is going to be the Texas A&M Fighting Aggies, okay? Season depends on Marcel Reed. He is going to be a huge X factor. He could possibly be one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC. We've seen his potential. We've seen him at his best. He is one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC, but at his worst, go watch the Miami game from last year. That was a tough watch for him. He did not play well at all in that game. He had a wide open guy for a touchdown to win the game, or at least tie the game late in the game, and man, he really struggled. So whenever he plays the top defenses in the country like Miami was last year, he seems to struggle quite a bit. If he can get over that, if he can play good against everybody, he's going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC. But fortunately for him, the rest of the team is really good. The defense is going to be really good. The wide receiver room is going to be really good as well. Malik Craver's coming back. He had over 900 yards last year. They also have 5 returning starters on defense, so they're also going to be really good again. It's just, to me, the season completely depends on Texas A&M. I see them going 9-3 in their schedule, 6-3 in SEC play. Really excited to see what Texas A&M can do. Really like what they're building there. I think they have a really good coach. I think Mike Elko's doing a really good job there, building a really good program, and I think, again, in the future, they're going to be really good. We talk about a lot of these teams, like, they're just so close. There's a lot of teams that maybe 2-3 years, Texas A&M, LSU, Alabama, it's just next year. They're a year away. And continuing that theme is going to be Tennessee, number 5 in my SEC standings, going 9-3 overall, 6-3 in conference play. Look, Tennessee is a year away. Who's playing quarterback for them? Same question that I had for Alabama applies here to Tennessee. Is it George McIntyre? Is it Faison Brandon? You got a ton of really, really good players there. Quarterback's room is going to be good. I think they're just a year away. It reminds me whenever they had Nico Iamaleava and, he had all that drama, but they were building towards a year. The year before he left, that was supposed to be the year where they were going to be really good. Last year was supposed to be a really good year with Nico Iamaleava, and then it was supposed to go into Faison Brandon, and then he would continue the flag, but everything happened with that and, super confusing there. But last year was supposed to be a really good year for them, and he ended up leaving, and, it's a kind of a weird year, but you ended up getting a lot of good play from everybody else. The defense really stepped up. They are 8th in returning production in the country, so everyone's coming back from last year. The entire offensive line is back. All 5 starters for the offensive line are back. That is a huge deal for a new quarterback coming in, not having a terrible O-line. Go look at Arch Manning and how bad he was early in the season. A large part of that was because of how bad the offensive line was. That's how Tennessee is avoiding that this year. The O-line should be pretty good. It's just depending on the quarterback itself. Now, George McIntyre, Faison Brandon, who's playing quarterback? Like I talked about earlier with Keelan Russell and Austin Mack, it's kind of the same thing here. Faison Brandon, he's a 5-star. He has all the talent in the world. He's going to be really, really good. He's a true freshman, top 5 recruit from last year. And then you got George McIntyre. I think he was a 5-star at one point. I know he dropped. I'm not sure how far he dropped. He might have been, he's at least top 200. I don't know if he was top 100 recruit by the time that the class ended. But at one point, he was a very highly regarded player. He was really good in high school. Just don't know how good he's going to be here in college. I think you heard a lot of bad stuff about George McIntyre in the spring. I think Faison Brandon really took hold of that job in the spring, but now coming back in fall, it seems like things have kind of shifted back to George McIntyre. I think I heard somebody talking about it. I forgot who it was, so I apologize for not giving credit, but he was talking about how George McIntyre in the spring, all the pressure was on him. He's the older guy. He's supposed to win this job, right? Then you come into fall and Faison Brandon's in first place. He's outperformed him in spring, and he's supposed to be the guy that's, taking every first team rep. He's doing a really good job, and he's supposed to win the job because he's already in first place. He had a way better spring than George McIntyre. Then all the pressure's on Faison Brandon, and then he can't get through that, and George McIntyre kind of takes the lead. One thing that guy also talked about, and I'm really sorry, I don't remember who was talking about this, but he was saying how you don't really know how good Faison Brandon is because he's one of those players that can move around. He can run around in the pocket. He can get out of the pocket. He can take off with his legs. He has the athletic ability to be a running style quarterback or a dual threat type of quarterback. George McIntyre doesn't have that, but because Faison Brandon has that, you don't really know how good he's going to be whenever they're wearing the red shirts and you can't hit the quarterback, right? You just don't see that yet. It's like he talked about how Joshua Dobbs was that way. You didn't really know how good he was going to be because he couldn't show off who Josh Dobbs was in practice because you couldn't hit him. So that is where I think Faison Brandon probably wins it once we get to the season and we're playing real football games. I think Faison Brandon takes it eventually. Of course, I'm always going to go with the younger kid, the more talented kid, the guy who can throw the ball a mile, the guy who can take off and move with his legs. I always prefer that type of quarterback. If Faison Brandon can continue to do that, then I think he's going to win the job eventually. If not, then we will see how George McIntyre does. But I think Tennessee, I think they're going to be really good. Like I just said, Texas A&M, LSU, Alabama, all of these teams are just one game away. And I think in 2027 might be their year to truly compete. Now, really excited to see what Tennessee does. But now let's get into inside the top 5. It's going to be number 4, Oklahoma. See them going 9-3 and 7-2 in conference play, so they drop an out-of-conference game. I bet you could probably guess who I see them losing to, but I really, really like what Oklahoma's bringing back. 9-3 is definitely a floor. I could definitely see them beating Michigan. This is 9-3 if they lose to Michigan. If they beat Michigan, which is very, very, very likely, definitely not possible whatsoever, they could be 10-2 and inside the college football playoff. Now, 12th in returning production. That means something. That's going to be huge. That's going to be a huge help for them. But not only are they 12th in returning production, because returning production, the stats that I look at is how many snaps you lost over how many snaps you have. So how many snaps that somebody's been on the field and played compared to how much you had last year. And they are 14th in that stat. Hypothetically, that could mean you're bringing in a lot of transfers that have a lot of experience at other places that maybe weren't as good as Oklahoma, so it's hard to translate as good they were. But Oklahoma's not that. They have 14 returning starters. It's tied for third in the country. That's going to be a huge help. Now, which John Mateer do we get? Do we get injured John Mateer? Or do we get healthy John Mateer? Because last year, at the beginning of the year against Michigan, John Mateer was really good. He put his name up in the Heisman conversations at one point. Then he hurts his thumb and he comes back and he's just not quite the same player. Do we see the same player that was most of the year last year whenever he was kind of iffy, felt like he could be a little bit better? Or do we see the John Mateer from the beginning of last season? Because if so, then Oklahoma will beat Michigan. They will beat a lot of teams and they will be on their way to the college football playoff. Now, they also have Isaiah Satanga coming back. He was a really key piece on that offense. I believe he had about 900 yards. Don't quote me on that, though. That might be wrong. He is really, really, really good. Isaiah Satanga's coming back. He was really good last year. A key piece in that offense in the wide receiver room. The run game, though, just like Alabama, the run game was absolutely terrible last year. 104th in rushing yards per game last year. Just absolutely abysmal. If they can get better in that category, then Oklahoma is going to be really good. If not, then I see them having a very similar year to last year, maybe losing an extra game than they did last season. Now, of course, the defense is going to be really good. You got Brent Venables there. He's always going to have a really good defense. I trust that defense completely. Just a huge question if that offense can get going in the run game. If so, then Oklahoma is going to have a really good year and will be better than 9-3 as I predict them. Now, the number 3 team in the conference is going to be Ole Miss, and this is one of my favorite teams in the country. I see them going 10-2, the first team in the SEC that I have making the college football playoffs. 10-2, 7-2 in conference play. Best backfield in the country, in my opinion, or at least very, very, very close. You got Kawan Lacey and Trinidad Chambliss back there. That's going to be a huge help. Now, they are second in returning production. I just explained to you how that stat works. So they have a ton of experience coming in there. That's going to be a huge factor. 5 returning starters on both offense and defense. So 10 overall. That's going to play a huge factor. Now, the question I have for them is who steps up in the wide receiver room. We just talked about how the run game needs to improve for Oklahoma. Well, the wide receiver room is what needs to improve for Ole Miss. The defenses were going to be really, really good. You got Pete Golding in there. He's always going to have a good defense. I love whenever defensive coaches are the head coach because I can always trust the defense to be really good. Brent Venables the same way. Pete Golding's going to be the same way. That is going to be extremely important. The only question I have is going to be the wide receiver room. Deuce Alexander, Jonte Cook. Deuce Alexander, he's really good. Deuce Alexander had about 684 yards last year, so a decently productive season, but definitely could be better. Becoming the number one target there in that offense, that's going to play a huge factor. If he can step up and become a really good wide receiver, 1,000-yard wide receiver, that offense is going to be really good. Jonte Cook, a former 5-star, I believe he was at Texas, and then I think he was at Washington, and then that ended up not working out. He's had a very weird career. I think he's gotten in some trouble. Don't know exactly what happened there. I don't know exactly what he's doing, but I know he's at Washington, and then he got dismissed from the team, and it's been a whole mess for Jonte Cook, but he's now at Ole Miss, and former 5-star receiver, he had all the potential in the world. Don't know if that's passed him by now, but it's been a few years. He's a really big-time talent. If he can turn that into production, then this offense is going to be really good, and they're going to be easily in the college football playoffs, one of the favorites to win the national championship. Look, Ole Miss, to me, is in the top 7 or 8 teams in the country that have a shot to win the national championship. There is a solid line. I think it's Ole Miss, Miami, and then a drop-off. I think, we talk about the top 25, right? And then you get to the top 10, and you get to the top teams. You got Texas, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Georgia. You got a ton of teams in there, and then towards the end of around 7 or 8 is whenever I see the drop-off between national championship contenders and the rest of the field, right? Ole Miss is included in the national championship contenders. I think they're going to be really good. Definitely have a shot to win the national championship this year. Don't know if they're the favorite. Probably, like I said, they're around the 7 or 8 teams that could win the national championship. I don't think that they will win the national championship. So I am rooting for Ole Miss. I hope that I'm really, really hoping that they win that game week 4 against LSU. That's going to be one of the craziest environments. I've talked about it earlier in the show. I've talked about that game all offseason. Every single one of us should be paying attention to that game, and I'm going to absolutely love every second of it. I hope Ole Miss wins that game. I don't cheer for people very often. That's why I don't call myself a journalist, because, I like to cheer for teams, and I don't really hide that. And Ole Miss, I am cheering for. I hope that they win that LSU game. I hope they have a really good season. I hope Pete Golding proves a lot of people wrong. Hope he proves Lane Kiffin wrong, that Ole Miss can win a national championship. So really, really hope that Ole Miss can have a good season. I think they will. Just need the wide receiver room to step up. Now, getting to the top 2, and these 2 teams I think are above the rest in the SEC. These 2 teams are top 5 teams in the country. These 2 teams are the cream of the crop. They're going to have really good seasons no matter what. And that number 2 team is going to be the Georgia Bulldogs. Look, it's one of the most reliable teams in the country. They're always going to be really good. The defense is always going to be really good. I absolutely love what they're building there in Athens. Now, this is probably the 20th straight year that we're questioning Georgia's wide receivers. I don't see a lot there. They lost Zachariah Branch. They lost Dylan Bell. They lost a lot of good talent there in the receiver room. Last year, we had questions about it coming in, but we felt better about it, right? This year, we have a lot of questions, and we don't really have a lot of answers. Last year, we were like, okay, we know who needs to step up. This year, don't really know who needs to step up. Now, despite that, they are returning 14 starters, and that's going to play a huge deal. They were tied for 2nd in the country in returning starters. They're going to be really good. The defense is going to be absolutely amazing, bringing back 8 of the 11 starters from last year. Look, Ellis Robinson, KJ Bolden, and Jordan Hall. All 3 of those players are going to be household names by the end of the country. Ellis Robinson and KJ Bolden, I think, already kind of are. But by the end of the season, Ellis Robinson's going to be one of the best cornerbacks in the country. Nobody's going to be able to throw the ball to whoever he's covering. You got KJ Bolden there in the linebacker room. He's a big hitter. He's always going to make a ton of tackles. And then you got Jordan Hall on the D line. I think he's going to be plugging up run holes. He's going to do a really, really good job. The defense is star-studded. They're always going to be really good. And then you go to the offensive side of the ball, and even though the wide receiver room might be as good, but they're bringing back a lot of the offensive line. Nate Frazier, he was a young running back the past 2 years. He's going to be really good. One of my favorite running backs in the country. And then you got Gunnar Stockton, one of my favorite players in the country. He's one of those players that will fight and fight and fight until the game is absolutely over. If he doesn't hear a whistle, he's going to keep playing his ass off, and I cannot wait to watch him play this year again. Probably the last year that we get him. We've had him here for, I think it's been 2 or 3 years. Maybe it feels longer than that, because he came in for a hurt Carson Beck 2 years ago, and then he was the full-time starter last year. So it feels like he's been around forever. This should be probably his last year, I'm assuming, but I absolutely love Gunnar Stockton. Love the way he plays. One of those players that I think everyone can kind of relate with. He drives that big old freaking F-150 truck. I think it's an F-150. Drives a really cool looking truck. Absolutely love Gunnar Stockton. I think he is one of the most relatable players in the country, and that means a lot to me and a lot of other people, especially down in the South. So really, really, really love Gunnar Stockton. Think he's going to be really good. Think he's going to absolutely play his butt off. He's going to play really well this year. Now, I got to circle back to the wide receiver room. I have to point out that they don't have a wide receiver that was over 500 yards last year. That is not good. Georgia has got to find a way to start recruiting better wide receivers. And until they do, I think it's going to be hard to get back to where they were winning back-to-back national championships. Now, Georgia very well could win the national championship this year. They're having a really good team. The rest of the team is really good outside of the wide receiver room. I just think they need to be better in the receiver room. It's just really hard to look at and be excited about. I hope that they are better. I hope that they can improve in the future. And even if it's not this year, they get better in the future. For my friend Wes, he's an absolutely huge Georgia fan. For his sake, I hope that Georgia gets better in the wide receiver room. Even if you go back to the 2021 and 2022 years, they had some pretty good wide receivers. You got Donnie Mitchell, you got George Pickens, you got some pretty reliable wide receivers. Nowadays, it's totally bare, and I just question if that limits their ceiling, and I think that's why I see them going 11-1 this year, losing a game along the way, 8-1 in conference play. I think they're going to be really good. They're going to be one of the best teams in the country. Just if they can reach the mountaintop, get back to where they were in 2021 and 2022. Don't know if they're that good, but man, Georgia's always going to be one of the best teams in the country, and I cannot wait to watch them. Now, last but certainly not least, the number one team in the conference going 11-1, 8-1 in conference play. My pick to win the SEC is going to be the Texas Longhorns. Look, I know everyone's picking on them, and I know that I'm just jumping on the bandwagon, but look, it is hard not to love this Texas team. 4th in returning production, 12 returning starters. Cam Coleman and Ryan Wingo, you got 2 star wide receivers. That is a wide receiver room that you just don't get anymore. You know, you got the transfer portal, you got NIL. Go look at Ohio State. Ohio State always has the best wide receivers, right? They used to have absolutely loaded receiver rooms. Got Marvin Harrison sitting on the bench because you got Chris Olave and all these other freaking wide receivers that seem to be endlessly good. Tons of wide receivers there. Well, nowadays, you got the transfer portal, you got NIL, and these guys kind of want to go somewhere where they're going to be the number one target and they can show who they really are. They got really, really lucky that Cardinal Tate came back for last year, and then they ended up, being really good, and you got 2 really good wide receivers there. They don't really have that anymore. You got Chris Henry Jr. coming in there. That's going to be really tough, but my point is, Quincy Porter and Mylan Graham, 2 5-star wide receivers that usually you stay in the Ohio State room and you stick there, right? You just become a really loaded room. Well, they want to go somewhere else, and then they leave for more money or whatever, whatever reason they decided to leave, they leave. And you just don't get that anymore where you have 2 really good wide receivers, 2 true number one target type wide receivers. Now, I think that Ryan Wingo, as good as he has been, is probably going to drop to the number 2 wide receiver option, but he's still going to get a ton of targets. He's still going to be one of the best wide receivers in the country. You got Cam freaking Coleman coming there. I don't know if you guys saw that catch that he had in practice. I think it was about a week ago. If you guys saw that online, I'm sure you did. If you're watching this podcast, I'm sure you were able to see Cam Coleman's insane catch that he had in practice. Looks like an absolute alien. He's going to be one of the best wide receivers in the country. And he honestly probably was there at Auburn last year. I think he only had about 800 yards, which is just totally blasphemy. Like, I cannot believe that he didn't have 1,000 yards at Auburn. He will have 1,000 yards this year. Cam Coleman, Ryan Wingo combining to be probably, in my opinion, the best wide receiver room in the country. Now you got Oregon, Ohio State still there, but I think Texas has the number 1 wide receiver room in the country. Now, the question mark, and everyone's asking this question, is going to be Arch Manning. We know how much he struggled last year. If this year he can get off to a better start, hopefully the O-line is a little bit better. They only got 1 offensive lineman from the transfer portal, so I don't know if they're going to be that much better. Fortunately, they got a lot better towards the end of the season, so there is still a lot to like on the offensive line. If Arch Manning can trust that, if he has a good O-line, if he has time to get the ball to Ryan Wingo and Cam Coleman and give them time to run their routes, this is going to be one of the best offenses in the country, right? You added Hollywood Smothers. He's coming in there. He's going to be really good. You got a transfer from Arizona State. He's going to be really good at the running back room. I cannot wait to see what that offense does. In my opinion, it's going to be probably the best offense in the country. I'm trying to think of another offense that I think is going to be really good. You got Oregon. I think they're going to be really good. Ohio State, obviously, their offense is always going to be really good. But the more I'm thinking about it, the more I don't see an offense that is as good as these Texas Longhorns. Now, take a look at the defense. And look, the defense might be better than the freaking offense, okay? You got Colin Simmons. He's an absolute monster there off the edge. 12 sacks last year, one of the best edge rushers in the country. He'll be going in the first round of the NFL draft next year. He is going to be an absolute monster. And everyone looks towards him whenever you think about the Texas defense, but then you throw in a guy like Rasheem Biles, who is one of the best linebackers in the country last year, over 100 tackles at Pitt. He's going to be really good. You add him with Colin Simmons, and that defense is going to be absolutely unstoppable. I cannot wait to see what Texas is going to be. I think they're going to be really good. I'm talking with one of my buddies. I'm trying to get to go to one of their games this fall. I'll talk about that more in the future, but hopefully that becomes reality, and that will be amazing. Getting to see this team in person, that would be absolutely awesome. I absolutely love what Texas is building there. Steve Sarkisian, he's one of the best coaches in the country, in my opinion. I love what they're building. Now, what happens if Texas has a really good season, they win the SEC, but they lose in the quarterfinals? What happens if they lose in the quarterfinals? That's the question that I have for Texas, because everyone talks about how, it's such an advantage to play the week before because now you're still healthy because you had all that time off. You still had a ton of weeks off to get healthy, right? But the team that you play in the next round who has a bye is always going to be a little bit rusty. And if Texas falls victim to that, and they very well could, then man, that is going to raise a lot of questions about Steve Sarkisian. I think he might be on the hot seat going into 2027 if they have a bad year. I think if they get to a semifinal, and even if they get to a national championship, of course, they could even win the national championship. At this point, they might be my pick to win the national championship. I really love what Texas is doing, but if they don't have a good season, if they don't deliver in the college football playoffs, then it might get a little shaky there in Austin, Texas. Now, for me, I think he's brought it upon himself. Of course, you want that pressure. You want to be able to look around and look at your team and say, man, this is the best team I've ever had here. I love that I've had the resources to build a team like this. I should have the pressure to go and win. If I don't win with this team, then yeah, maybe I should take a look in the mirror and maybe improve something about how I coach, right? But if Steve Sarkisian, he's done a really good job in getting these players in there, and he's brought the pressure upon himself, and that's a good thing. By no means am I saying it's a bad thing to have pressure. Pressure makes diamonds, right? I love what they're building. Now, the vibe around the program is national championship or bust. They have brought it upon themselves in the way that they talk, the way that they carry themselves. They got to win the national championship. They got to at least get close. And for me, I'm almost never a guy that talks about a season being national championship or bust for a team. It's almost never like that. As long as you're knocking on the door, you'll get there eventually, right? But Texas, I think, is the exception to this rule. You have to at least make the national championship. With this kind of roster, with this kind of team, you got to at least make the national championship game. If not, then I think this season is a little bit of a failure. But definitely not going to end this on a bad note, because Texas is one of the best teams in the country. And if you're a Texas fan, you should very much be excited about what your team is building this year. And it is going to be an exciting year there in Austin, Texas. But that is going to do it for my show. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys have made it to the end of this episode and you haven't hit the subscribe button, what are you doing? Go down, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, give me your thoughts, tell me who's going to win the SEC this year. And thank you guys again so much for watching, and I'll see you again next week.